How will this crackdown hit America's truckers? Folks, trucking is huge. It's the lifeline, the artery. And right now, certain federal agencies are stretching, loosening their shoulders, and warming up in the bullpen. And they're ready to throw a fastball right straight into the American supply chain. But here's the thing they never stop to ask you, the men and the women behind the wheel, what happens when that ball smashes right through your paycheck, your freight lanes, and your long term stability? Nowadays, we live in an internet world where everybody's talking. But have you ever noticed something? Constructive critics speaking directly while jealous people whisper from the shadows. Well, today we're not just whispering, we're spotlighting the truth they will not broadcast because the mainstream media completely overlooked a major piece of the story that we're about to cover. A piece that affects freight, it affects rates, it affects the workplace, and ultimately affects whether or not we can make trucking great again. USPS, the money, the panic, and the kind of dubious greed that rattles the entire system when no one in Washington pulls the right lever. Greetings, truck lovers and truth seekers from across the United States of trucking. Boss Man here with another trucking headline and another dose of critical thinking fueled by faith, sanctioned by God. We are your connection to all things trucking. Before we dive first into today's headline, let me warm you up with something every one of us has seen in this wild and noisy, thumb scrolling social media circus we're living in. Do you ever notice how people build entire mental worlds around the idea that folks like us never really change? Yeah, they cling to it like a bad chapter in a book. And the moment you start improving, the moment you grow and level up, do better, think sharper, their whole little world starts to crack. And instead of cheering for you, they lash out. Not because you did something wrong, but because your growth exposes their limits. It makes them do the reality check most of us years ago never counted on happening. And that, my friends, is where we are today. Because here on this broadcast, on this channel, we reward growth, we celebrate truth, and we call out the nonsense that tries to hold the industry back. So before we jump into the story today, do me a favor, go down below, like this broadcast. Don't do it for me, do it for the mission, do it for the message that it sends to the greater public and to those in our industry that we can make trucking great again. So let's jump into this featured news story. One featured by FreightWaves. Federal agencies have shifted their strategy recently with all the news about CDLs, non-domicile, foreign influence.
Private businesses that are allowing people to get commercial driver's licenses without having the requisite skill set to actually get on. I mean, they can drive school buses, they can drive oil tankers on our roadways. They don't know what they're doing, but they're being pushed forward by these CDL mills.
Why are some of them, from the Punjabi area of India? We know and we've been reading and researching in this. There seems to be one area of India that really provides most of these new CDL commercial truck drivers licenses, but it's a real industry from India to the United States.
And I don't know why that's happening and where it's coming from, but
happens sometimes.
But this is not part of the lawsuit. But there's also another consequence. These are great American paying jobs, great American companies that
They're
go
not
back
going to
50
American
years.
drivers anymore.
They're not going to American drivers. The rates are coming down for truckers. You can't sustain yourself. You can't make a living as an American truck driver.
Instead of focusing solely on border checkpoints and physical enforcement, they're now targeting the financial channels used by undocumented immigrants. Now, this is a major pivot and a move from chasing bodies to chasing dollars. And make no mistake about this, kind of money flow enforcement is aggressive. It's sweeping, and it's going to ripple through every industry, even loosely connected to immigrant labor. Includes trucking, includes warehousing, includes construction, includes a very wide net of people involved with the art of cheap labor. Now, let me say this because many of you longtime listeners know where I stand. Okay. I've said for years, if you want to begin cleaning up the ills of this industry, You don't start with the trucks. You don't start with the logbooks or even the licensing. All of that's important and it goes a long way to solving the problem. But you go after the money that fuels all problems. Cut off the cash pipelines behind illegal operations, fraudulent carriers, shady labor practices, and the overnight landscape begins to change. That's right. I'll say it again. The overnight landscape begins to change. And folks, what we're seeing out here right now might be the first real sign that Washington's actually waking up, whether intentionally or accidentally. They're waking up to the reality that whether or not they get it, what's right is restoring labor to the American truck driver. It's another story, but make no mistake, when the government starts squeezing financial arteries, the effects hit all of us down the line. Now, stick with me because this is where the real conversation begins. For decades, and you know this because many of you have lived through it, cheap labor has been the golden ticket for politicians, for corporations, and every middleman who's ever looked at a spreadsheet and asked, how can we make this cheaper without changing really anything about what we're doing? This obsession with cheap labor has been sold as efficiency, profitability, even innovation. But the truth is, it's been a slow poison, a shortcut that undermined American workers, bankrupted honest companies, and it's degraded the trucking industry piece by piece. And here's where the story gets real interesting. Because if you want a perfect example of how this problem is finally caught up with the very people who enabled it, look no further than the United States Postal Service. USPS tried in what may be one of the fastest policy face plants in logistics history to ban non-domiciled CDL drivers from hauling their freight. Just picture the meeting where they thought this was a great idea because Sean Duffy said what he said, but then the numbers came in. Then they actually sat down and looked and listened to people. The phone calls were made, contracts were really being questioned, and the gears inside the mail machine began to grind to a halt. And within days, literally days, slammed the reverse gear so hard the transmission nearly fell out because half their contracted lanes would have stalled out like a rookie grinding gears on his first day at work. Cheap labor was a patch they couldn't ignore. And when they tried to pull the patch off, they exposed a gaping hole underneath, a hole they helped create. With the help of corporations, bigger carriers along with them, and politicians, everybody knew what was going on. Even the parts of the federal government knew. Sean seen it, and he's still dealing with it. This is why the first part of this update, FreightWaves article about the financial side of the crackdown, the shift away from border wrist slaps toward cutting off the money, matters so much because money's at the root. Follow it and you find the truth. Cut it and you expose the weakness. Pressure it and the cracks appear. Whether Washington intended it or not, this crackdown is hitting the very arteries that have kept a two-tier labor system alive. One that hurts American truckers like you and me, drives down wages, enables fraud, and invites unsafe practices into the supply chain. And now, for the first time in a long time, the system is being forced to face the consequences of its own shortcomings. Folks, the bottom line on today's shakeup, the federal crackdown targeting financial channels tied to undocumented labor isn't just a headline, it's a signal. It's a wake-up call that the money behind the shortcuts, the cheap labor schemes, and the corner cutting in our industry may finally be under pressure. Combined with the sudden backpedal by the USPS on banning non-domiciled CDL drivers, it shows one thing loud and clear. You can't build a supply chain empire on unstable foundations forever. When the money dries up, so does the labor, along with it, the capacity, and the consequences are unforgettable. If you want real, unfiltered conversations about what's happening in trucking from the front lines to the policy fight, subscribe now to this channel and stick with us because we're not just watching the news, we're breaking it down video by video, issue by issue. We're calling it as we see it, and we're building a future where trucking is honest, fair, and strong. And you can sound off right here. For honest, hardworking truckers who respect the logbook and who play by the rules, this moment could be a turning point. It could mean fewer cut rate, under the table operations competing for your loads. And it could mean carriers and brokers rethinking hiring practice, finally valuing quality over quantity. So here's my piece of advice. And you know I don't mince words. Get your paperwork tight, keep your CDL credentials, your compliance, and your ethics ironclad and sharp. Build your business the right way, not by shady quick fixes, but you build it by the book, and you build it for the right reasons. Because when Washington tightens the faucet, the shortcut crowd panics, and suddenly every bad actor is exposed. But the driver with the clean hands and the clean books, they become unstoppable. That's the American way. And that is the rest of the story. Join us tomorrow for another Headlines. Till then, keep her rolling.